Hey everyone, Aaron here. Today I've got a little Dashcam versus battle for everyone. The Rove S1 against the Aukey 4K model DR02J. I picked these two units because at the moment they're both decently reviewed on Amazon, priced under $100, and most importantly, come with the newest image sensors. In the case of the Rove S1, we've got the Sony Starvis. This sensor is marketed as being specifically designed for better low light performance. On the Aukey 4K, we've got an ON semiconductor AR0521, another sensor that touts its low lux credentials. Now, fair warning, this might turn into a bit of a long video because I've got a bunch of stuff to cover. But don't worry, we'll keep it interesting. I'm going to start with an unboxing of both units and run over some out-of-the-box impressions. I'll then move into a bunch of different side-by-side shots taken by the two cameras under varying lighting conditions and resolutions. Finally, we'll finish up with some conclusions. If, like me, you are an undiagnosed ADHD person and want to skip ahead, the approximate timestamp for each topic is right here. Or maybe it's here. So let's get right into our first unboxing, the Aukey 4K model DR02J. We start off with a relatively boring shrink-wrapped brown box. Cutting that open, and the first thing out is the camera unit itself, nicely protected with some plastic and foam. It's much smaller than I had anticipated. It also feels very light and, well, cheap. For comparison's sake, here's my iPhone 6s, which should give some sense of scale. Moving on to accessories, and we've got what appears to be a decently long power cable. Disappointingly, it uses an all but obsolete mini USB connection. Not a huge deal, but if one spends a good amount of time concealing and then wants to upgrade cameras down the road, it will be that much harder, as pretty much anything else will use micro or USB-C. Next up is the Aukey branded 12-volt power adapter. It does provide two USB Type-A outlets, so that's nice. Following that are some cable management clips. Foam mounting tape is pre-applied and should make tough installs a bit easier. This is one of those things that they really didn't have to include, but it's nice that they did. The final item out of the box is a pair of mounting plates. I think it's really thoughtful Aukey included two. One has 3M VHB adhesive pre-applied, while the other does not. Setup is pretty straightforward. Just enter the date, time, and format and you're good to go. Unfortunately, it's a bit hard to see here. I didn't notice that glare when filming, so sorry about that. Once in the menu system, we've got some basic options: resolution, loop length, date overlays, camera beeps, exposure, compensation, frequency, speed units, accelerometer, screensaver, motion detection, and time-lapse functions. All in all, a simple but functional and easy to use menu. So initial impressions on the Aukey 4K Dashcam can be summed up as follows. Mediocre build quality meets a nicely intuitive menu and is packaged with some generous accessories. Pretty good, but not great. Next up, the Rove S1 by Anker. This particular copy is manufacturer refurbished. I purchased from Amazon via Anker Direct. At the time of purchase, it was $20 less than new, representing a 22% discount. I've always had good luck going this route. I'll place a link to both products in the description below. Use of them will earn the channel a small referral commission, which I am very grateful for. Compared to the Aukey, it comes in a much nicer retail quality box. I know in the past, I've received some comments questioning why I even mentioned package quality. Here's why. To my way of thinking, it's a clue as to how much overall effort a manufacturer puts into a product. Compared to things like build quality, usefulness, or support, it's very minor. I just know that I always feel better about a product when it's nicely presented. Opening it up, and the first thing out is the Rove S1 itself. Build quality impressions here are very good. It's got a decent amount of weight to it, and the overall fit and finish feels superior to the Aukey. It's also noticeably larger. I'll get them side by side in a minute. Underneath the camera, and we've got a little thank you love letter from Anker and the instruction manual. In the accessories department, the first thing we see is the 12-volt power adapter. It too is a dual USB unit. It's Rove branded, not Anker. No big deal, but a little odd considering the latter is known as a USB charging accessory manufacturer. Next out is the lone mounting plate with 3M VHB adhesive pre-applied. Following that, we've got a little automotive panel tool. This likely cost the manufacturer about 2 cents to include, but can really be helpful. So good on them for that. Rounding out the accessories are a 32GB Samsung micro SD card and a micro USB power cord. Firing the unit up, and it does not like the fact that I haven't installed any memory. Remedying that, and like many devices, it needs a little reboot action to get going. The menu system is simple but a bit wonky. One scrolls horizontally through the items with the arrow keys and then cycles through individual options with the select button. It's not hard to get used to, but seems a little backwards. Basic setup procedures mirror that of the Aukey, so I won't bore you with that again. And while the Rove S1 doesn't include a time-lapse function, it does support GPS and Wi-Fi control, so you choose which one is more important. Putting them side by side, and the difference in build quality is really obvious. If I had to compare to something, the Aukey 4K Dashcam would be like a flip phone circa 2005, while the Rove reminds me of an early gen 2009-ish Android phone, at least in terms of fit and finish. Breaking out the scale, and the Aukey is weighing in at just 2.2 ounces. The Rove S1 comes in at 3.9 or 77% heavier. I think that obvious weight difference is where the build quality impressions come from, but don't let that alone fool you. The Rove has a traditional lithium-ion battery, whereas the Aukey uses a newer supercapacitor, so that might explain the delta. Screen viewing angles are largely similar, as in they're both pretty good. Although it might be tough to see on camera, the Aukey's screen is both brighter and higher in contrast, even if it is smaller. So I think at this point we've spent enough time looking at these two units side by side. Let's get them mounted up and see how they perform. Because I received my Aukey 4K camera the day before I was about to go on a little road trip, I thought I'd use that opportunity to test out its time-lapse functionality. Sadly, there really are no setup options here. It's either on or off. One gets a 1-second shooting interval, and videos are stored at whatever size and frame rate the camera is otherwise set to. So it's not like a GoPro where one can choose their shooting speed and duration. Here's what a time-lapse recorded at a 1-second interval and saved at 1080p and 30 frames per second looks like on the Aukey 4K Dashcam. Absolutely terrible. When I first took a look at the footage, I almost thought the camera was broken or something. I couldn't believe the sheer number of compression artifacts and complete lack of sharpness. It looks like someone took a glamour shot from the 90s and then posterized it in Photoshop. I'm talking about the ones where they'd soften the image so much it would hide blemishes and also pretty much all facial detail. In any case, I find the time-lapse video quality out of the Aukey 4K Dashcam comically bad. Just to give you guys a point of reference, this here is a Yi action camera. A Yi light action camera actually, and it is very cheap. It's not even available on Amazon any longer. When I purchased last year, it was about $60. Let's take a look at what a 1080p 30fps time-lapse out of this camera looks like. Notice the huge difference? I won't get into the weeds here, but I just wanted to show you guys that a small sensor is capable of very good results. Now for our first side-by-side with the Rove, I've got a little full sun beach drive-by. It's midday without too many harsh shadows, so it should be ideal filming conditions. I will point out one error on my part. I recorded the Rove's footage at 30 FPS and the Aukey's at 60. They really should be the same, but as we'll see in a little bit, it doesn't really make that much of a difference. Oh my goodness, Aukey. How can you be this bad? How does a company presumably concerned with their brand reputation, even if only on Amazon, launch a product this uncompetitive? I think my 2008 Samsung Gleam with its VGA video capabilities upscaled to HD would look sharper. I just can't believe I'm seeing video quality this poor in 2019. On the other hand, the Rove S1 looks pretty good. Sharpness, contrast, saturation, and color accuracy all look decent. I would like to see a little more dynamics range though. For a camera designed with low light in mind, the fact that shadows really have no detail at all is a little disappointing, but overall, a nice performance. So in our full sun 1080p test, the Rove S1 wins by a mile. Next up is a medium light test. This was taken at around 6 in the evening under an overcast sky. We've got some daylight left, but we're well past the point of full sun. Both cameras are set up to shoot 1920 by 1080 at 60 frames per second. These are what I'd call default dashcam settings. Once again, the Aukey looks terrible. It's riddled with artifacts and isn't sharp. The Rove S1 is now struggling quite a bit with the shadows, but everything else looks good. Now let's see what happens if we bump up the resolution on the Aukey. I'm now recording at 2880 by 2160, what they oddly call 4K. Sadly, at this resolution we only get 24 FPS. That might work for a cinema camera, but for a dash cam, it's really inadequate. The Rove is once again at 1920 by 1080. It's max resolution, so have a look. Alright, the Aukey is now finally looking okay. In fact, I'd say that color accuracy, dynamic range, and saturation is now superior to the Rove S1. However, the latter is still sharper. Take a look at this sign for the 5.0. The words police department are clearly visible in the image produced by the S1. That's not really the case with the Aukey. Overall, I consider both good results. Next up, nighttime. So in this sample, we're driving around in the rain under street lighting. Here I consider color accuracy broadly similar. Neither do much in terms of the shadows, leading me to believe this ad from Sony marketing this Starvis sensor as some sort of low light voodoo master is complete bullshit. That said, I think it does outperform the Aukey and its on-semiconductor AR0521, but just barely. Overall, detail is largely similar as well. Neither is particularly capable of generating images capable of deciphering road signs, let alone license plates. It's like the higher frame rate of the Rove is being offset by the higher pixel count of the Aukey, and both are using massive amounts of digital noise reduction. Okay, so I've got one more side-by-side to show you guys. This is a little footage I shot turning onto a side street at night, so no overhead lighting. It's interesting because it's very low light. Only my headlights and, more importantly, no bright areas for either camera to attempt to expose for. I've also set up the Aukey to shoot 1440p and 30 FPS, what I believe to be the sweet spot for the camera. The Rove absolutely smashes its competitor. We see trees and bushes that just appear to be black splotches in the footage produced by the Aukey. So maybe that Starvis ad wasn't complete BS after all. Conclusion time. This product comparison doesn't leave a whole lot of maybes. The Rove S1 by Anker is far and away the superior product. Considering Anker is offering them refurbished for $20 off makes it a better value too. I consider at 60 FPS mandatory for a dash cam. We only get that at 1080p on the Aukey, and at that resolution, the footage is unusable. In addition to the often superior, sometimes equal, but never worse than footage the Rove produces, we've also got some extras like GPS and Wi-Fi. Let's talk about that last bit for a second. The unit's remote control is actually quite good, as evidenced by its 4.8 star rating in the iOS App Store, and that's with over 2,000 reviews. I found it provides simple but effective camera setting control and easy access to footage on the go. Like, what more do you want? GPS is also available, but I tend to leave that turned off. Here's why. Minimal upside with massive downside. Let's say, for example, you're cruising along and someone darts out into the other lane from a side street. An accident that's clearly not your fault. You proudly produce your dashcam footage that you think proves you're not to blame. But that same footage contains a GPS overlay that shows you were driving a few miles over the speed limit. Well, now who's at fault? The way I see it, why even raise the question? So for me, GPS just isn't important. If it is for you, well, then that's one more reason to consider the Rove S1. So that's it. The product from Anker has better image quality, better fit and finish, better low light performance, and a surprisingly useful app and GPS integration. It's the clear winner. But there is one area where the Aukey manages to do a bit better. Accessories. Although the S1 bundles a memory card, it's really only worth about $6. On the other hand, the Aukey has an extra mounting plate. If something ever happens to the primary one, it would be a lot harder to replace than a micro SD card. Add in the included cable management clips and I think it edges out the Rove, if only in this one minor category. And that will about do it for today. If you found any of this useful, a like, share, or sub would be greatly appreciated. Okay, take care.